Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian. I'm joined by Paul Thurrott, as I meet you every week from Thurrott.com. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Well, boy, you know, tech is amazing to me for a number of reasons. One, There are weeks that nothing is happening.
I know.
And then all of a sudden, everything happens in one shot.
Yep.
It's like almost like sweeps week, you know? Like everybody's competing with each other, so like the best stuff is happening right now.
This is the second day in a row I've had to just stop publishing on my site because there's too much stuff.
I saw you've been putting out so much stuff like the last couple days.
Yeah.
Talking about
I didn't really expect that, honestly. I thought Mobile World Congress would be kind of uninteresting. And
I feel like the last couple of years it's gotten better. You know, it's gotten a little bit more interesting. There's been more announcements happening. Before, for me, it was just like a bunch of phones that we'll never get in the States. And to a lot of people, that's what it was, or a lot of phones that we won't ever happen.
Yeah.
But that's not the case anymore.
It's changing. Things are changing.
A lot is happening over there.
Bob Dylan had written a song about this.
I would have loved to hear that song, actually.
Yeah.
Especially about Mobile World Congress.
Yeah.
Mobile World. So before we go and we talk about the phone announcements, there's Google announcements, there's an Apple Watch coming out, Paul. I don't know if you know this, and they're going to be unveiling it tomorrow, next week.
I was going to say,
no.
Is it tomorrow? Oh my God. I'm not ready.
I just gave you a heart attack. Before we do that, Paul has a new website, guys. A little shout out, because this is Shout Out Tuesdays here on the GFQ network. A little shout out to Thurrott.com. A lot of people are asking about the mugs, Paul. A lot of people want these mugs. Would it be possible to do a giveaway here for the mugs?
Oh, I'll have to talk to people about that. I suppose it's possible.
Because a lot of people are asking about these mugs. I mean, every day I'm getting emails about the mugs. It's generally like this. It goes, why are your eyebrows like that? Yep. Why do you tan your skin? What's up with your face? And what about those mugs?
What about the mugs? Well, we are giving 5 away every day. It's been going pretty good. I just saw the first person posted a picture that they've received their mug, so that's starting to happen. But I mean, I don't remember when it ends. Sometime this month is when the promotion ends, and then sometime after that, we're going to actually offer them for sale.
That's excellent. Well. So it's going to be available, guys. Even if you don't win, you don't get the mug.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there with this. But I'm a big fan of Thurrott.com. I love the way that it's evolving, and this is genuine. I mean, I'm kissing your butt a little bit, but rightfully so. Sure. The site has really evolved from your previous website, where now I feel like it's more about Paul Thurrott and what Paul likes. And I think the name kind of suits it. Like, I like the little pieces that you do, like about a clean PC. You know, like I like those kind of pieces that you're putting out there, because a lot of people find that useful. Other than coming and getting the news on your site, they'll find something like that really useful, especially, you know, with the fiasco that last week was with this.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's part of it's just starting over. I sort of resolved that I could go back and do some basics things again for the first time again, in some cases. Part of it's just coincidental to Microsoft kind of re-embracing the PC. I mean, one of the things that was sort of sitting in back of my head during the whole Windows 8 time period, which we're still in, was this vision that Microsoft had of the future, but how everything was going to be mobile devices, and Surface is like a tablet that can replace your PC, and kind of a growing kind of not weariness, but wariness of that. Like, I really like the PC for what it is. I think the PC does is the right job, right tool for the job. And with Microsoft sort of re-embracing that, I love that, because it sort of lets me re-embrace the PC. And so there's going to be stuff around building and upgrading PCs and more PC-centric stuff. I mean, I have to write about phone and tablets and stuff, and I do care about that stuff. But the ability to kind of go back and write more about the stuff that really is kind of at the center of what I do, which is the PC. I think that's,
and I mean, it's an exciting time for the PC also. I mean, I think with Windows 10, we're going to see this kind of boom when it comes to PCs and how people perceive it with the hardware. You know, I mean, when we talk about PC, I'm talking about laptops as well. We're seeing some amazing hardware coming down, you know, to the PC, where for a while it wasn't happening like that. It was just a standard laptop, and now you have, you know, the Lenovo Yoga, and you got HP putting out great stuff. So it's changing, and I think for your website, that's great, because now you could kind of focus in on those things.
Yeah, it's been a good bit of coincidental timing, so that's been nice.
Paul, you know what I would love? Like a 12-page like declaration to DirectX 12.
Wow.
The future of DirectX. I would love
that. I'm very firmly in the kind of Xbox camp when it comes to gaming. That said, I have started looking into PC gaming again for the first time in a long time, and I will have some stuff to say about that. Yeah, I mean, nothing yet, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm going to be building a gaming PC. I shouldn't say that. Maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see.
So a lot to come on Thurrott.com. So everybody, you know, go check it out. Go support it. Go visit it. And tell them that I sent you, because I get a nickel every time. Yeah, Paul sends me a nickel every time I talk about Thurrott.com. I'll
send you a mug.
Yeah, I'll get a mug. I have a plethora of mugs. The entire wall is stacked with Thurrott mugs here that I'm hoarding for one day.
Good for skeet shooting.
It's like it's like the Beanie Babies. The 90s all over again with Thurrott mugs. Paul, let's talk about Samsung. Okay. They unveiled the Galaxy S6 and the S6 Edge at Mobile World Congress. This is a much better phone than the Galaxy S5 was. I have to tell you, I was not impressed with the S5. I thought it was plasticky. I thought it was a little cheap. There was too many gimmicks with this thing, which Samsung has done. Yeah. And I don't want to say they've gotten it right, because I have not used this phone yet. But it seems with all the reviews, it appears that they have gotten it right this time with this device, with both of them. And you have it on your website here. I'll put it here. I mean, it's a beautiful looking device. This is the Edge, obviously, because it bends a little bit. Beautiful device, hardware spec wise, great. They're very fast devices. Now the camera, it seems like they've really improved the camera on this, where they're doing a lot of processing on the software side when it comes to the camera. Now,
which a lot of companies are starting to do.
Yeah.
Microsoft does that on the higher end cameras. Apple does it. I'm curious, there are always claims about cameras, and camera claims are tough because they're almost always not as good as, as they're built.
Real world.
Apple's camera is definitely as good as they build it. Samsung, their previous phones, it wasn't as good. So I'm a little leery of this one, but I guess we'll see. It could only, it's okay. The Samsung, like the Galaxy S5 camera is okay. It's not great.
It's not great. It's okay. Yeah. I mean, but at the event, they made a point out of pointing out that this is a better camera than the iPhone 6.
Yeah.
6 Plus.
But that's what I mean. So in other words, yeah. So if you watch the presentation, it's worth watching. It's a little scattered, but it's not as crazy as some of the previous stuff that the Samsung did. I hope it's as good as they say. I'm definitely going to get the Edge version of this phone when it comes out. I'm very intrigued by this.
So why the Edge and not the regular S6?
Because the regular one is just a phone. You were talking earlier about the S5. You're right. The S5 is not inspiring in any way. It's plastic, all that kind of stuff. I don't mind the plastic in some sense because the back pops off. You can access the battery, which you can replace. You can access the micro SD card, which now they don't have. And you can access the SIM card from there. And that's kind of cool. I like that kind of thing. And I actually ended up never using this, but for $5 or $6 on Amazon, I bought an extra battery. My wife got one for her Note. And if you're out in the world on a trip like that, it's kind of nice to be able to replace your battery.
Yeah.
So they have some technology in there for fast charging, which I think is kind of a big deal in the S6. But, the S6, just the S6, not the Edge. If you look, aside from the materials, it's just a standard 5-inch phone design, right? It's slightly bigger home button than on the S5. It's obviously nicer materials. But if you had an S5 next to that and you were looking at them front on, you wouldn't see too much of a difference. That S6, the straight on view, looks just like my S5. And so the reason I want to get the S6 Edge is to see the additional functionality of those side screens, which kind of wrap around the edge, which I think is neat. But also, I just think it's more visually, kind of aesthetically, it's just a nicer design and it's unique.
It's a very, yeah.
There's really nothing like it.
Yeah. A couple hardware specs here. 64-bit octa-core 2.1 gigahertz processor with separate 1.5 gigahertz in application processor.
Yeah.
And I don't understand exactly. Did they?
Yeah, I did. That was not actually explained at all.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Is it just utilizing 1.5 for application processing and the rest is going to the operating system? I mean, they didn't really go into details with that during the announcement. I don't know if anything has come out since then. But, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a really fast phone. The other thing here, which is interesting, is that it's going to have 3 gigs of LPDDR4 RAM.
Right.
So much faster RAM.
Yep.
And that's a lot. 3 gigs.
DDR3, which is more standard.
Yeah. The micro SD there was something with the storage also. They were using a different type of storage, which was a faster type of storage.
Yeah, the storage is faster, but the micro SD expansion is gone.
Yeah.
According to Samsung, very few people ever used it. But in lieu of that, they're going to bump up to base storage to 32, and then they'll have 64 and 128. And so in that sense, they're presenting a friendlier picture than, say, Apple is, right? Because Apple will give you a 16 gig device, but then the next one up is 64. And so they're trying to get you to throw in an extra $100 at them, whereas Samsung's just throwing that in for the base price. And so that's pretty nice.
Another thing here was that there's going to be all those bundled apps, obviously, like the health, Samsung Pay, which is coming this summer. They're going to be incorporating that. The Finder, S-Voice, private mode, so all the Samsung stuff. But it is less than previous versions of Samsung. And this has been a problem for me. This is why I haven't gotten a Samsung, S-line phone for a while.
I mean,
because the thing is bogged down with a bunch of garbage. My father-in-law has an S5, and it's...
Well, by the way, so the funny thing about the S5 is the S5 was actually a little bit of an improvement over the S4.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the S4 ads, but there would be like the guy waving at his phone or waving his hand over his phone, and it was all about these kind of crazy things that it could do, and they scaled back some of that in the S5, but they've scaled it back a lot. And honestly, I look at this list, and there are a couple of things in here where you're like, whatever, but there's nothing like embarrassingly stupid, and it's not. It's a pretty short list.
Is TouchWiz gone? Have they taken it out?
So I'm not. TouchWiz is like their front end or whatever.
The front end, yeah.
I mean, if you look at I'm trying to bring it up now. Like the S5 is it's basically stock Android with, Samsung icons. I mean, there's nothing special going on here. It's a home screen with widgets. So, yeah, I would say it's probably been.
Or they've cleaned it up a little bit. I mean, this is great. It looks like it's going to be a great phone. I'm curious to get my hands on this thing because the camera more than anything else matters to me because an Android phone is an Android phone is an Android phone. Yeah. But for me, from what I saw with the camera, it actually looks great. It's a 60 megapixel rear camera and also a 5 megapixel front-facing selfie camera, Paul.
So, by the way, that phrase, 5 megapixel selfie camera, they didn't say fixed focus or anything like that, but suddenly a very common feature on phones, right? The front camera used to be like a VGA unit or like 1 megapixel or something. Like it was always pretty lame. And all of a sudden it seems like everyone has a 5 megapixel, front facing selfie camera.
Yeah. So. HTC was really the one that changed that with the last, the M8, the last version of that thing. I mean, the front facing camera on that was actually really, really good. It was impressive. And they took a lot of criticism for not having a high megapixel camera.
They blew it on the back camera, which by the way, they fixed on the one M9.
But you know what's crazy, Paul? It wasn't a bad rear-facing camera. It wasn't awful. I mean, what was it? Like 5? It was like a 5 megapixel or whatever it was.
No, it was weird. So it was 2 cameras. They worked together to create the image. It was fairly low resolution from just like a sheer megapixel perspective. I don't remember the exact stats, but the issue I had with it was not. It was just. It was possible to take reasonable pictures with it. It required a lot of work. And, when you see cameras like the one on the iPhone 6, which is very quick and beautiful, or now with the Lumia Denim update, the 930, 1520, whatever on the high end on the Microsoft side, those cameras are fantastic, like out of the box. And so It was just a little hokey. I haven't, obviously they just announced the new one and I haven't seen it, but I'm assuming that that was part of what they're addressing in that update.
Someone, I got an email from somebody and they go, you know what this compares to, like the Android camera issues? It's the equivalent of built-in webcams on Windows laptops, on just PCs.
Yeah.
Just It's always going to be bad. It's never going to be that great. It's always going to be bad.
Well, I mean, but maybe that's not always. I mean, it always was.
It always was.
You know?
Yeah.
So
now it's kind of
it
changing.
seems like it seems like they're getting better.
So, I mean, this looks like a great camera. When are you hoping to get your hands on this phone?
I mean, I'm just going to buy this at retail,
yeah.
like whenever it comes out. So that would be April.
Do we have a price for it?
No, but the indication is that the pricing will be the same. So the low end version would be $199 with a contract, and it kind of goes up from there.
Yeah.
So they should match up with the iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, good looking phone. I'm sure they're going to sell a lot of these, and it is what it is. I mean, the on hand reviews were pretty positive.
Yeah, and this is the one time, you know, with Samsung there was always these caveats. You know, it was like cheap, you know, plasticky design, which some people actually kind of like. I mean, I have to say, there's one. It's a goofy thing, but you know, when you're running up the stairs and you drop your phone and it explodes into like the front, the back, and the battery, and you can pop it back together and it just works. I mean, in some ways that's better than dropping it on the stairs and it shatters.
Everything exploding, yeah.
Which is like the more normal response or thing that happens these days. You know, plastic, whatever. Actually, I'll show you, because if you look at the S5, you know, like the phone itself is fine. It looks just like the S6. It's fine. The issue I have is like this weird. It looks like aluminum and it's ribbed. I don't know if you can see it in the camera that well. What it is plastic that's been made to look like aluminum, probably painted to look like aluminum, and it's ribbed, which is like what is it? It's so awful. I mean, the back of this thing is fine. And of course, you can replace the back. That's another nice thing. I actually don't like glass-backed phones. Apple got away from that. The S6 is in fact a glass-backed phone, so I'm not. You know, we'll see how that goes. But I don't. The plastic back of the S5 is fine. I like the dimpled texture. I like that you can pop it off. You can replace it with other colors. You can replace it with flip covers, right? Which some people like. The front of it, absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong there. It's just this awful silver ribbed silly. I just hate looking at it. It's terrible.
I tend to make the worst
awful
decisions when I buy my phone. Like I always try to get something a little different.
Yeah.
And I always regret it. I bought the LG G2. I should have bought the Samsung S5, but I didn't. Because I didn't want the Samsung bloatware, and I was worried if I was going to root this thing, and you know, you couldn't do it with the Samsung. It was a whole thing. And I'm thinking, like, that's so crazy. Like, I should have just bought the one that I should have, and I would have probably been happy with it. I'm really interested in the S6 for an Android phone. This is probably the one that you want to get. You know, I can't think of anything else that's really up to par, because this is the latest and the greatest, and it has the latest version of Android. But I want to kind of.
I mean, by the way,
yeah.
You know, the one thing that they did, which I find very interesting. You know, Samsung has been accused of copying Apple, but more important, has literally been brought to court and lost twice for copying Apple. And there are some design elements to this device that are very Apple-like. There's only a couple, but they're very notable. And that ribbed edge of the phone on the S6 is a curved, non-ribbed, you know, metal edge. It looks exactly like the edge on an iPhone 6, exactly, with the same antenna strips built into it, and on the bottom, the same basic port and speaker cutouts. It looks almost identical.
I saw that.
And
yeah.
So it's a little weird, and I would be a little surprised if Apple didn't go after them for that. But the one thing I will say to that is, the thing I like most about the iPhone 6 is how that feels in your hand and how beautiful those devices are. And they've sort of emulated that part of it. And if you were going to copy one thing about the iPhone,
that would be it.
iPhone 6.
Yeah.
Frankly, I mean, I think that would have been it. And so hopefully they don't, you know, they're not forced to change it or something. They'll go back to like a rib design or something. But I think it's beautiful.
I'm curious when you get it. I'm interested to see your full-on review on your website. There was a lot of interesting phone announcements. So I guess, do you want to talk about the leak Microsoft kind of jumped the gun and they, the information.
Well, there's not much to say. They just mistakenly posted. It was, in fact, all it was the headline of a blog post that they would, later put up. But so Microsoft announced 2 Lumias. I actually expected a few more than 2. I was surprised that was all there was. But the Lumia 640 and the 640 XL, they're basically the same device. The non-XL has a 5-inch screen. The XL is a 5.7-inch screen. I think the XL actually has a better camera as well.
The 640 sports a 5-inch display, 720p display, quad-core 1.2 gigahertz Snapdragon 400, 1 gig, while the...
Yeah, I might not have it in my article, but I want to say that I'm not sure on the 640. The 640 XL, I think, has a 13 megapixel camera. It's not a pure view, not a pure view, not a purview, a pure view
it's
camera.
It's not Peruvian, Paul.
It's not Peruvian. Like Sean Connery on that SNL skit.
Yeah.
But it is, I think they're both decent cameras, but the bigger one probably has a much better camera.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think they're basically the same. So a couple of things in here. I would say, obviously, there were many Lumia products. They all have different numbers. It's kind of hard to know what's what. They're changing the way they number things a little bit. And so when you think about the modern Lumias, the ones that have been released recently, like the 535, the 730, 735, and the 830, the 640 and 640 XL fit in logically as their numbers would indicate from a processor, RAM, storage, sensors kind of perspective. They used to have different names for their phablets. So the phablets were like 1320, 1520, those kinds of numbers. Not always, but let's say mostly. And by calling it a 640 XL, what they're doing is indicating it's this kind of device, but it's a bigger screen. And so it's
so are we going to see this down the line with all of them? Like we're going to see a 740 and a 740 XL and an 8.
Well, so I don't think they'll actually do a big screen version of every phone. But if you think about think about the Samsung devices right now. We have a Samsung Galaxy S6 and we have a Note 4. Both of them come in sort of an edge version, but the Note is their
and then plus remember the Mini. You're going to get the
I know, but I'm just to simplify it. You could imagine that maybe in the future Microsoft will come out with a high-end flagship phone, and maybe they'll call it like the 940 to use an obvious name. And maybe so that will have a 5-inch screen. And then the 6-inch version of that would be the 940 XL. And the internals would be the same as they should be. Why would there be subtle other differences? Yeah, aside from maybe the camera, although those should be the same too.
Is there any like what's up with the numbering? Like, is there any kind of rhyme or reason for this? Like 640?
No, it's sort of like, remember that old Windows experience score? I mean, bigger numbers are going to mean better.
Sure.
And that means, and by better, we mean better in a very general sense. And so something like the Lumia 535 or Lumia 435, I'm forgetting the numbers.
Except for when you're talking about the 1330, because the 1020 is a better.
That's an older device. So in other words, when we look at the modern devices, what we see is Snapdragon 200 at the low end, Snapdragon 400 at the mid tier, which is basically all we have today. So Snapdragon 400, you're talking about a Lumia 830, a 640, 730, that kind of thing. And then in the future, when we have, I don't know what the processors will be. Let's say 810, 820, whatever they have, Snapdragon, whatever. Those will have larger numbers, presumably. We don't know. They haven't been announced, but that would be the guess.
So I'm assuming they're holding off on the flagship devices until Windows Phone 10.
Yeah, and they said that.
Yeah. They did demo some new features from Windows Phone 10. You want to just go through some of those?
Yeah, I mean, it was nothing we didn't know about, but it was the first time they had demoed it on phone. And so if you think back to January when they announced the second technical preview for Windows 10 and they talked about phone, they talked about universal apps and how the same apps essentially would be running both on phones and on tablets and on PCs. And so the PC-based version of the technical preview that we got then has, a new universal app version of actually just a few apps. The Photos app was new. I think the Maps app was new and a few others. But when you get Windows 10 Technical Preview 2 on the phone, a lot of those apps are still the old phone versions. And so during Mobile World Congress, they did a demo where they showed certain new apps both on a phone and on a PC. And in each case, it was the new mobile app version, and some of them were new. And so they showed maps on the PC and the phone. Maps we had seen on the PC, but the phone version was new. And the integration that you have between them, where you do a search on your, maybe we're gonna go to a restaurant tonight, and so you start the search on your computer, and maybe you and your wife are looking over, she's looking over your shoulder, and you say, okay, this is where we're going, and let's get that, the map. And now it's on your phone because it's syncing across your account. So you get in the car, you bring up your phone, go to Maps, and the search is in there, and it comes right up. They showed off. What else did they show off? I'm already forgetting. I should look at my site. I can't remember.
I didn't add this one to the notes.
Yeah, no, I just don't remember. Project Spartan. It was the first time they'd shown that off on the phone, and so this is the new web browser. We don't have that on PCs either today. Sometime this week, I believe, they're going to release a new technical preview build for PCs. We'll get Project Spartan at that time, but the version on phone actually looks a lot like
what is the game plan for Spartan when it comes to long term? Is this
is the long-term browser? Yeah.
This is going to take over for IE.
Yep.
But it's not. This is going to be IE more than anything else, right? It's not going to be IE is not going away and becoming Spartan. This is just
IE is going away. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, the brand, the name is gone.
Yeah. No, they're not going to call it. They are not going to call it IE.
Interesting.
Yeah, there will be an Internet Explorer that sticks around for backwards compatibility reasons, right? So they're going to continue using that and use the name. No, but they're going to rebrand it. I think it's a big part of the stink around IE is that people hear that name and they think, I'm not going to use this thing, and so they want to rebrand it. Spartan is just a code name. We'll see.
Yeah,
what they go with.
Web Explorer.
Web Explorer
or Microsoft Web Crawler. How about that? We could take it old school.
Oh God,
call it a web. The World Wide Web Access Port.
I hope they use Spartan.
It's a great name.
In fact, I'm pretty sure that they plan to use Spartan, assuming it passes all of the legal, hoopla that they'll have to go through to make that happen.
I'm actually shocked that they're going to kill, the brand when it comes to IE, considering how many people identify, with IE. Good and bad, right? Like, people know IE. People use IE. Most people are not... Okay, here's a good question. Do you think most people are actually getting IE? They get a new computer, they're using IE, and they go and they download Chrome immediately. Is that happening?
Well, it is happening, but not with most people.
Not with most people, yeah.
People like us do that. Normal people, I think, just use IE. I think that's the point. I think the only reason IE even exists is that people who don't know any better aren't getting rid of it. I just think most people don't take that extra step. But the people in the know... very few people are making the calculated decision. I've evaluated all of the browsers, and this is the best choice. I'm going to use this one. That really doesn't happen very often. It does actually happen, but most people who really have understand how this stuff works will use Mozilla Firefox or Chrome.
Yeah. Opera.
Maybe. No, to be fair, of course. There are people that really feel strongly about that as well.
They're still doing well in Europe, so.
Sure.
Which is amazing to me. I'm interested to see what they do with the web browser with Spartan, because somebody had a question about Bing being incorporated. Is there going to be a rebranding with Bing also now? Because.
Right. So far, no. And you see Bing, Bing is all over the place. It's in Cortana. It's in Project Spartan. You see it everywhere. Anything could happen, I guess. But no, I guess on the Bing end, though, the way I would think of that is, they might not have to rebrand it because it's more of a back-end service now. Cortana becomes your front end, and they're going to push that brand because Cortana has been positively received. But Cortana is just a thin layer on top of Bing. It's really just a front end to Bing, if you think about it, essentially, and to some machine learning stuff up in Azure, but basically to Bing. And, that's how you fix that problem. Bing remains, but, you're when you think I need something done or I need to find something out, you think of Cortana.
I was thinking just like by like a Bing.com. Like, is it easier to type in Bing.com than Cortana.com? If they let's say were to rebrand it.
Sure.
I wonder how much of that would impact it.
Yeah. If they were going to rebrand the search site, obviously, I think they would use Cortana.
Yeah. And they do not own Cortana.com, by the way.
Interesting. Okay.
The Cortana Corporation owns Cortana.com.
Oh, okay. Well, that might explain why.
Yeah. I don't know what the Cortana Corporation does. It's like Acme.
They should make katana swords.
Yeah, they make anvils, Paul. That's
they
all
really?
they do. They make no. I wish that would have been great if they did.
That'd be awesome.
So to kind of go more, I want to get through the announcements. There was another interesting announcement out of Barcelona. Was that Google is looking to get into the wireless carrier business. Now, by wireless carrier, they are talking about some sort of hybrid type feature where it's Wi-Fi and traditional over the air cellular, I guess.
Normally, I'm a little cynical about Google, but the one thing I will say is this is the kind of company that will solve this problem. Someone cynically had written it. This might have been in a headline or the body of an article somewhere on the web, but somebody, not me, had written that Google is going to show wireless carriers how to be wireless carriers, right? Which is funny, but actually, yeah, why not? I mean, Google is a company whose products exist solely in the web, in the cloud, I guess I should say. And what they know from having to deal with computers first and mobile devices now is that there's this disconnect that occurs when you switch between Wi-Fi and cellular. And sometimes you're on cellular and then you're not on cellular and it's just not available. And how do we deal with those? And so, platform makers, Microsoft included, have been talking about, for data and it's funny because this wasn't kind of presented from a cellular data standpoint, but from a data perspective, that if you were using your computer and you were online, that Windows can supposedly seamlessly switch between cellular data and, when it's available, Wi-Fi, which is generally stronger and more stable and reliable. And what Google is talking about is taking the next logical step, which is adding voice and texting to that as well.
Through wireless.
To this hybrid networking type. In other words, that to the user, you shouldn't have to worry about it. You're just always online. But the wireless carrier, in this case Google, in the future, hopefully AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, will have these hybrid networks where there are wireless hotspots around. There might be balloons floating out over the Midwest or whatever it is, satellite, and different ways of getting connections to everyone, everywhere, that your devices, whatever they may be, will switch seamlessly and silently between these networks, and you don't have to think about it, that everything just kind of works.
So here, and tell me if I'm wrong, guys, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but so Google is not going to build infrastructure, obviously. They're going to become a wholesaler. They're going to buy wholesale access from, let's say, T-Mobile.
Actually, they've already signed deals, with T-Mobile and Sprint.
Okay, so T-Mobile and Sprint. So they're essentially becoming like a secondary carrier, I'm trying to think, like Cricket, for example, right? Cricket relies on Sprint or T-Mobile.
But there's another aspect to it, right? Yeah, I don't know how this works on Verizon. I think you have Verizon, right?
I have Verizon, yeah.
So on AT&T has this notion of hotspots that they have around. Or if you're like an Xfinity customer, Xfinity has this concept of hotspots, right?
Time Warner also has it too.
Okay, I mean, a lot of people do, right? So if you're at home on your Xfinity hotspot, you've logged in with your credentials or whatever. If you're out in the world with your laptop, and there's an Xfinity hotspot, you're just online. You don't have to even think about it. It's kind of a cool feature. But that has nothing to do with voice or with texting, right? And so this is like the final frontier for this, that, A, that this stuff just kind of works everywhere, and B, that it involves everything that's important to you, not just data, but also phone calls and text. And you can see the beginnings of this technology when you have stuff like, a future version of Windows Phone where you can hand off a phone call to a Skype call and maybe turn it into a video call and then go back to text only or whatever. And, to the user, you shouldn't have to think or even manually switch. It should just kind of happen, and we're kind of getting there. It's a little bulky, and I'm sure Google has their own stuff for this. Apple has that technology where you can get your phone calls through your Mac if you have an iPhone nearby and other things like that. I mean, you can see how it's evolving in that direction, but what has to happen above us is the network stuff, and that's where Google's coming in. And they're not a wireless carrier, but they kind of understand the problem.
I'm trying to think of the big one that does that, right? Like, who relies on Sprint's network? Like Metro. Okay, important. So wasn't Metro was it a Metro P? Yeah, that's a great one. I needed a rim shot for that one. Wasn't it like Metro PCS or one of them just relied on whatever? Like, there's a bunch of these, right?
Sure.
So essentially, that's what they are becoming. On top of becoming a hybrid provider, it's a virtual network operator. I mean, that's what they're becoming. Yeah. But how are they going to deal with the Wi-Fi aspect of this hybrid service.
Yeah, I don't know. So, by the way, they've released literally zero details of this. May is when Google I/O happens. That would be the logical time for them to announce, details about how this works. They've literally said, I think the few things they did say among them were, we're really not sure how this is going to work exactly, but we're trying to identify this problem and, kind of get it out there.
Yeah. So Ting, for example, great example. They're former advertiser of ours, past advertiser. Ting works with Sprint. They are a MVNO of Sprint. Mm-hmm. That's easy to do. All you're doing is signing a wholesale access licensing agreement, and that's how you handle it. This is a much bigger picture here, where they essentially would have to have Wi-Fi access everywhere that they have cell phone access, if that's how they're going to do it. I mean, to make it, obviously in a perfect world, that's how it would be. But unless you know what they do, Paul, maybe they could sign a deal with Xfinity and Time Warner and rely on their hotspots.
Yeah. I mean, Google obviously has antitrust issues around the world and all kinds of other things. And so with Mobile World Congress happening this week in Europe, they're over there in force. And so Google chairman Eric Schmidt met with the new European Union competition commissioner, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce. She's Dutch, but to deal with some of their search-related stuff. But separately, they've had guys from their mobile group over there talking to wireless carriers and saying, look, we need to kind of work together, rather than having you guys just rat us out to antitrust officials all the time. Like, we need to start working together and solve problems together. And of course, what Google's going to do in the United States, because they're from the United States, is start this networking thing, just like they did, they're doing Google Fiber here as well. And you kind of there's no way to really understand what the issues are without kind of just stepping into it, right? And they're going into it by saying to the big four wireless carriers, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Sprint, that, we're not here to take place of you. We want you to adopt this stuff for yourself. Everyone should be able to do this. They're presenting this as something where they're going to work with the industry. And so I don't trust Google as far as I can throw them.
Sure.
But like I said up front, I think the one thing I would say about these guys is, if there's any company on earth that understands the issues related to this topic, it's Google, because their stuff is only in the cloud and it has to communicate with the devices somehow.
There has to be a connection for them to function.
When that connection is severed, which on cellular connections happens with annoying regularity, that is a disruption to their service, and it is a bad thing for them and for their customers. And so they're trying to figure that out. It's ridiculous. You live in New York City, for example. You go into New York, right? And you're in a cab and you're going between buildings in New York, and your cell coverage is cutting out. There is no excuse for that. In a city like New York, right, should be first-class wireless coverage no matter where you are, in every single direction, up, down, whatever. If you're in the bowels of Penn Station or in the top of the Empire State Building, you should be able to get the most perfect connection on your device. And I think that's what they're. And by the way, I should also add, if you're out in the middle of Nebraska or whatever.
Yeah. Well, how about Queens? How about Bayside, Queens? Yeah. I have, by the way, 0 bars. I have no cell, nothing.
And I'm in my own little black hole here for whatever reason too. It's weird. I mean, I walked 15 feet from my fence and it's fine.
Same thing here. I walk down the block. I got 4 bars. I walk anywhere on this block, nothing.
But by the way, my mobile device, when I from in my house or outside my house, even better, I can hit wireless networks all over this neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
No problem. So imagine if those things could feed me voice and text and data.
So I did that experiment last year. I don't know if you remember that, where I got the Lumia 520. Mm-hmm. And I decided I was going to connect to all these wireless, networks. I'm not telling you guys to go and do this. Yeah, it wasn't Wi-Fi. It was like Xfinity's internet.
Oh, okay.
So there's Time Warner and Xfinity. I know a couple of people with it. So I wanted to test this out to see how well it works. And to be honest, it worked really well, because I was able to pick up the networks. I was getting, pretty decent speeds. Probably not 4G speeds, obviously. I was getting decent 3G speeds.
Right.
Maybe.
But imagine that for
4 to 8 megs.
But imagine if that worked for voice, right?
T-Mobile does that now, right? They're doing a Wi-Fi, but it's more like a hotspot within. They're doing Wi-Fi calling.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
Voice over IP and I don't know what the equivalent is for text messaging. I'm sure there's an MMS, SMS over IP kind of.
It's a very interesting concept. Later this year, they're also launching a solar powered drone to be part of Project Titan, which is going to kind of work alongside Project Loon, which was when they sent the balloons up in the air and there was virtual cell towers. Now, this is a bigger picture thing, right?
Sure.
I don't know how likely we are to see these giant balloons flying in the sky providing internet access to us here.
It would be like that BioShock game where there's like, giant dirigibles.
Yeah. Or I don't know if we're going to see, solar powered drones in the sky just flying around and giving us Wi-Fi access. But there has to be a better method to this, right? And I think their method is going to be to kind of piggyback off of existing infrastructure that Time Warner has put in place and, Xfinity has put in place, or any of the other carriers. But what happens if you're in an area without this, which many areas don't have this? Like Fios, for example, does not provide you with hotspots like that.
No, they don't.
So, what do you do? I don't know.
Well, look, the hope here is that Google will really inspire, I guess, these other companies to do the right thing. And by the right thing, it means compete.
I mean, it's kind of worked.
Those kinds of things to their own customers.
I mean, so far it's kind of working with Google Fiber, right? That they go into fiber goes into an area that, let's say, AT&T versus there.
All of a sudden, yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden,
we can turn on fiber in this place.
You have a half a gigabit of internet access.
If this net neutrality thing goes through as expected, then that will be even better because now Google will have the legal right to latch on to all of the infrastructure that's already in place. They won't have to string all new fiber or whatever. They can go to places that already have fiber and start offering their service there as well.
Yeah, I got into a discussion with someone over this. And there's a lot of politics that go into play, and I don't want to get into the political stuff because there are people. There's positive and negatives to all the arguments to this entire thing. But somebody said, "Well, why? What's wrong with competition? What's wrong with allowing people to compete?" And I go, "Well, what competition are you talking about? Sure. Because I don't have the option for Xfinity and Time Warner." When it comes to cable, I don't have the option for cable.
But that's
vision.
not even the point. Like it's I'm sorry, that's part of the point.
But
I mean,
but
I
that's
think of
the
it
thing.
more as a services thing. Like in other words, let's say you and your buddy in your garage come up with the ultimate Netflix killing video streaming service, and you've gotten all the deals together with content providers, and you're raring to go. But here's the thing: on Verizon Fios and on AT&T and on Xfinity, Netflix is the established company. They already have money in the bank. They establish deals with those companies. They're getting the fast pipe. You're not getting the fast pipe. You're screwed. And that's anti-competitive. That's why net neutrality is happening. To prevent companies like that from beating up on new companies.
See, the argument exists for the smaller guy trying to become a provider. But how about guys like, I'll give you an example, like Verizon, right? Verizon Fios was going to be a great thing. It was going to shake up the way that bandwidth was provided, and it did for some people. Some I mean, for the some that got it, you had an option. You had another option, except for your cable provider. But what happened with Verizon? They turned around. They go, "Yeah, this is actually costing us a lot of money. This is what we're going to do. We're not going to compete with you anymore. We're actually going to sell your internet in our stores if people come into come into Verizon Wireless, and in return, you're going to give us Spectrum." And you're going to give us, 4G spectrum or whatever the deal was. And they did this with Comcast. They did it with Time Warner.
Right.
So, okay, there's
these companies are all evil. I mean, there's no doubt about it. These guys and the wireless carriers, I mean, they're all terrible.
How about the municipalities? New York City did not want Verizon Fios to come in. They had deals locked in with Time Warner. And a lot of municipalities, a lot of cities had deals with pre-existing services. Like New York City is an anomaly because you would imagine everybody in a city like New York, you should be allowed to pick whatever service you want, but you can't. You have Time Warner Cable, and that is all you have. And you have, and then there are pockets where RCN exists. If like a co-op was built, in the 70s, maybe you got RCN. If a brand new deal was put in place in the 70s, late 70s for cable, there's Comcast somewhere in Brooklyn. So this is. It is. They could all compete if they wanted to. They're just choosing not to because they all profit by this.
That's business. In other words, these companies will go kicking and screaming into the future. They don't want to change anything. They want to keep everything the way it is. In the article I wrote about the Google hybrid wireless service, I compared them to the car makers. I mean, these guys fought every single safety regulation that required them to put seatbelts in cars, put airbags in cars. to do all the things that make things safe for people, i.e. better for people, better for their customers, because they do a cost analysis of it, and it just costs them more money to do that stuff. And, the Google, it's so weird. It's sort of ironic because Google is in many ways anti-competitive themselves, but I welcome anyone shaking up this business. It's so necessary.
Well, they're shaking it up so they can take it over.
It's fine.
I mean,
sure.
Listen, and
I would say no, that's not true. So actually, they're shaking it up so that their services, which have nothing to do with providing wireless service to anybody, can be successful. In other words, the stuff that they make money on, which is today is essentially web ads, but they hope to make money on other things in the future, expand, services. This stuff has to work for them to succeed, right? And that's why they're doing it. It's as bald-faced as it can be. There's nothing wrong with it. I will complain about Google when they deserve it. This makes sense, and I think ultimately the end result will be good.
I think at the end, I think that too. I don't think this is going to be the end of our free speech. I don't think that's good. You know what? But who knows? Sure. Who knows? We could be wrong. Sure. I mean, we don't know. So my advice to people that are getting worked up, just step back a little bit and let's wait for things to roll before we start jumping and, going crazy over this and making assumptions that this is the end of the internet as we know it. Title II has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
DSL falls under Title II. There's a lot of services. AT&T Uverse, for example, falls under Title II because it uses copper. A lot of these services fall under Title II, and those services have not been crippled in any way due to regulation of sorts. So,
to be blindly anti-regulation is very short-sighted. In some cases, you really need regulation.
In some cases, you don't want any. I'm right in the middle, and I guess I'm wrong.
I really
for
do
being
think
in the middle.
We've reached the point where the internet does need to be treated as a utility, as a public utility.
Yeah, and that's where people get scared, right?
It shouldn't. I don't understand. This is as necessary as electricity in some ways, as water, as sewage. I mean, it's something that is just part of the fabric of our society.
And I'm going to present a question here, and I'm not picking a side, but I would really like an explanation from the other side because I'm curious about this. If regulation wasn't put in place, where electric was a utility, gas was a utility, or the expansion of wiring this entire country, how would it have been? How would the evolution of wiring this country, how would that have happened? If standardization wasn't put in, how would that have happened?
Nobody remembers this because it happened so long ago, but this goes back to our original antitrust laws, the Standard Oil of the early 20th century, right? Where these guys had a monopoly and they were keeping competition out. What you would have is the system before AT&T was broken up when we, into regional bells, or whatever they called them at the time.
Well, Verizon would never have existed. Yeah. The baby bells.
Baby bells. Thank you. It's that situation in every industry. It would have prevented the advancement of anything. I mean, nothing would have happened. It would have been terrible. Prices would have gone up. All monocultures are bad inherently. I mean, and so and sometimes you need regulation. You need some entity, let's call them a government, to step in and say, we need some number of players here that can compete fairly against each other. And the way you compete is to offer services that give you advantages over your competition and get you more customers. Ultimately, that benefits customers.
The phone, everybody needs to have access to a telephone, right?
Yeah.
It is.
By the way,
they have to wire.
We all did it one time. Remember, it was a big hunking piece of black plastic with a cord on it, and we spun our finger around in a circle. And that's what you get when you only have one company. When you have a monopoly, there's no reason to advance anything. Yeah. You own the market.
So, and this is my question, and I would love someone to tell me the reason for this. If there was no regulation when it came to the phones, which is Title II, how would the expansion of telephones, how would the expansion of, for example, any kind of utility, how would it have expanded? Would it have expanded as quickly as it did? Would it have not expanded as quickly as it did? So I would love to know, just their theory on this. Listen, I'm totally open-minded. I'll listen to everybody, and I'll listen to everybody.
Things aren't perfect, obviously, but it seems like in most of these related markets that we've moved or are moving towards the logical end game, which is that system where it just kind of makes sense. So think about the cell phone market. We talk about subsidized phones and how This system, prevents us from understanding how much we're really spending on things and how ridiculously expensive it is, and how those wireless carriers can keep charging you the subsidized price even though you've paid off the device you're using or whatever.
Yeah.
As we move to a system where we're paying more upfront for a phone, and frankly, phone prices need to come down. Phones are ridiculously expensive for what they are. We're getting a truer sense of the cost of things, and it gives us a more of a level playing field when it comes to choosing competitive devices. And I think ultimately it's going to benefit everyone. And most people, you kind of look at it from a really stupid, or simplistic, maybe I should say, viewpoint. You say, well, Paul, an iPhone 6 Plus costs $850. No one's going to buy that thing outright. Right. So that phone is not worth $850. That phone is worth
Paul,
at best
$400. Paul, wait a minute. Research and development, R&D.
No.
Remember to add that cost in.
You'll have to remind me how much Apple's profits were, because I'm pretty sure they're paying off that research and development.
Yeah. So it's a lot of interesting stuff, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this. I like to keep the conversation open. I like to hear from the chat room when it comes to this. A lot of people are heated over it. Let's not get heated. Yeah. Let's all chill out a little bit. Let's all have a discussion and figure, learn from each other. I'm a peacemaker here on the internet. Guys, that's it for
this water into rum.
Yeah, please. I've been having tea. I haven't drank today. I had a whole issue with my wine.
It is only 4:00 in the afternoon, Andrew. That's not unusual, I hope.
I mean, for most people, yes. For me, no. It's very unusual. Go to our website, gfknetwork.com, guys. Check out the show there. We're archived there. If you miss any portion of the show, of course, you can catch it there. You catch it on Thurrott.com and anywhere podcasts are available. Subscribe to us. Also, Thurrott.com, the news source for all things Paul Thurrott. Go check him out there. Paul also does another podcast called Windows Weekly. Mary Jo Foley and Leah Laporte every Tuesday at 2 p.m. East on the Twit Network, which is one of my favorite shows. Let's see, what else am I missing? Patreon. I totally forgot about it. If you want to help us out, you want to support us, you want to give us a dime, a nickel, whatever it is, go to patreon.com/whatthetech. Fund us there. We're going to do a post show called What the Talk. We do that every week after What the Tech, and that goes exclusively on Patreon. So I want to thank you guys for watching. A lot of people in the chat today. A lot of people having a discussion, so it's great. You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew Zarin. You can follow Paul at Thurrott, and that's it. We'll see you all next week on What the Tech. Bye-bye for now.